Hello! Welcome to the inaugural broadcast of the AllChemist Channel. I'm Gerry Trzupek. I am a chemist, as are my two brothers. I've been doing work in the environmental side, but on the industry side of environmental stuff for 35 years. And this is my one brother, Larry.
I'm Larry. I'm also a chemist. I have a PhD. I've spent most of my life in education, teaching at the college level.
And this is Gerry.
I have a chemistry degree. I work in environmental consulting. I also went to Loyola.
And he's also known as Keith Ortego. So the reason we're doing this channel is because, like a lot of people who do what we do, who have something, what are you looking at?
I'm looking at this.
This, okay, good.
I was going to ask about Keith Ortego, but why don't you tell people why we're doing this channel?
Okay, so the reason we're doing this channel is we get really kind of disgusted by the way journalists cover issues that involve chemistry in particular and science in general, and the way politicians glom onto some of that stupidity. And this is not, if you're just an ordinary viewer who's not a chemist, we understand chemistry is scary to a lot of people, and you probably hated chemistry in school. And even if he was teaching it, nice face. So we're just trying to bring things back to a level of discussion that is rational, because we get, like, journalists get so far out over their skis when they're talking about issues involving chemistry. Right? That's why I'm doing it. Why are you doing it?
Seems perfectly reasonable to me. And yes, I see the same sort of things.
Wow, he's never agreed with me.
I just love that out over your skis is used in everyday language. And what else do you take from ski jumping?
That's a good point.
It's the one thing it's provided the world.
That was, remember, everybody loved the opening of Wide World of Sports. Look it up on YouTube, the old opening of Wide World of Sports, if you've never seen it, because there was this one ski jumper who, I don't know what, he fell down just before the end? Anyway, he went tumbling off the edge of the ski jump, and they always showed it when they said the agony of defeat. It was great stuff. Also, the other reason we're doing this is because we're on a mission from God. So, who do you think will take that seriously first? Somebody will.
Yeah.
Anyway.
I think he's dead. Go ahead.
God?
No.
Jake?
Belushi.
Well, he's not the one who said we're on a mission from God. That was Elwood.
You know, as much as that's one of my favorite movies
I'm
in the
pretty
world,
sure
I
that-
didn't realize that.
I'm pretty sure they both did that.
Uh,
We can check later.
Yeah, we can
Don't
check.
bother the audience now.
Okay, so
They probably know, and they're telling us right now.
in this initial one, we're going to talk about risk. We're just going to free form talking about risk and see where it goes. But before we do that, I wanted to ask for some predictions. So let's assume this channel takes off and we're going well. Predict what's the first snarky comment we get. What is it going to be about? What's the first snark comment going to be?
I really don't live in the snark world. So,
Oh my God!
well, you're talking about family.
You grew up in the snark household.
I hadn't thought about it.
Yeah. Do you want to take a guess?
Doesn't it usually first go to who's backing these people? Because when you have an agenda against what's popular, then you're being put up to it.
You know, that's a really good point. And since we're not getting any money from anybody who matters, if people really hate this stuff, they should send us lots of money. And then they can claim with some veracity that we're being funded to do this.
I like that.
And that's cool. So if you're one of these greenies who's completely out there over your skis, send loads of money. We'll accept it reluctantly, and we realize it'll be used against us.
Yeah, we're starting the Stop the Trzupek Brothers Fund right now.
That's cool.
Yeah, that's our campaign. Okay, cool. Which, in my everyday job, because I'm dealing with environmental regulations and EPA and helping industry, people who actually get jobs and stuff, get through the sometimes ridiculous process that is EPA permitting and crap. I've always said my job is to put myself out of business. That's the way I look at my job.
That's good. And the job of bureaucrats should be to put themselves out of business. But they haven't. If they have figured this out, they figured out how to get around it.
Speaking of which, does March of Dimes still exist?
Yeah. Do you know what was the March of Dimes?
No.
It was whoever the president was who suggested that they do this. I just came across this, I think, on Reddit or something. Suggested that they send in $1. And somebody, I think it was an entertainer, and I can't remember who, said, "That'll never work. Make it a dime." People send in dimes, and that's how it became the March of Dimes.
I didn't know it.
Isn't that cool?
And it was for polio, right?
Absolutely.
And since polio's not around anymore.
Yeah, but there's all kinds of childhood diseases. But you're right. They conquered polio almost completely, except for anti-vax types. But they didn't go out of business.
Okay.
They stayed in business.
I just wondered. I'm okay, March
Well,
Dimes.
if you actually did something useful as a bureaucrat, you can make an argument for staying in business.
Sure.
Whether they're still doing anything useful, I'm sure we'll hear from the March of Dimes people. That's another story.
Yeah, no, we're okay.
And they
with that.
probably can tell me who it was who suggested the ascended dimes.
Okay. All right. Well, great.
And actually, you can look it up. Brought a computer.
Yeah, but we're not going to look stuff up. We're too lazy for that
Good
crap.
point.
Thank you.
Continue.
So Keith Ortego was a Chicago Bear from 1985 to
Number
1987.
89.
Yeah, number 89. And when Gerry was younger and in better shape, not that I'm anyone to talk about being in good shape, he came up with the brilliant strategy of impressing women by claiming to be a third-string receiver from the Chicago Bears, Keith Ortego.
Okay, just check it.
You're really trying to get us in trouble.
Sorry.
Can't. Okay. The couple of ground rules that I am going to suggest, and we can talk about before we dive into risk. One is, I don't think we should talk about motivations. I mean, like you said, people, like Jer said, people are going to talk about motivations with us, right? They're going to say you're funded if this takes off or does anything. But I don't think we should talk about anybody's motivations.
I don't think we'll stick with that, but it's a good start.
Okay.
But it does come into play sometimes.
Well, I guess
If the whole point of the podcast is supposed to be
science.
to establish
Yeah.
factual basis
No,
for
you're right.
concerns, then motivations are usually used to distract from that. You're only in this for the green of your pocketbook. How many times have you heard that?
yeah.
I stand corrected.
No, or maybe, I guess there's no absolutes, right? We're Catholics, by the way. So motivations, I would like to stay away from motivations as much as we can.
Makes sense.
Fair enough.
And we never go to Hitler.
At the very end, when we're done with everything,
I'll shave most of my mustache.
never mind.
But
That's
not
okay.
all.
No Hitler. That's cool.
No Hitler.
And no one could say what I look like. No, you would say Charlie Chaplin. Never mind.
And it will be interesting to see which one of us gets made fun of for our looks first.
It'll also be interesting to see how many minutes it takes to get to something substantial. But go ahead.
Are you impatient to get to something substantial?
No, I'm
Okay.
just curious.
All right.
You can do an over-under on that.
Yeah, you could. Okay, so we're
And
gonna,
then whoever wins can send the money to us, right? Because
Yeah.
we're not in it for the green.
right, stop the Trzupeks. So let's talk about risk in general, because risk is something that people do really crappy jobs on, especially in journalism and in politics. And my opinion, I know the word fake news gets tossed around a lot, but I think in our business, in science, it's not about fake news, it's about selective news. It's about selective use of facts to paint pictures. But you have some very good risk discussions that you do when you teach your class, so good risk, go.
Well, thanks for letting me know that was my that's what I'm supposed to be doing. I'll give you a starting point. The little blurb newspaper that I brought you.
Yes.
There was a quote there from some legislator, I believe in Texas, related to the whole episode that got you started, that is concerns about exposure to ethylene oxide. Ethylene oxide being a chemical that is relatively reactive and relatively harmful in a lot of ways. Anyway, this person said that there is no safe amount of ethylene oxide that can be released, and we should not allow the release of any ethylene oxide at all. And when you read about things or you're told of things about ethylene oxide, it's as I said, a substantially reactive, reasonably dangerous material. Actually, pretty dangerous material in a lot of ways. It's easy to be scared of it. The problem is nobody knows anything about ethylene oxide if they're normal human beings. If you're a chemist, know something about ethylene oxide. What I was going to ask you is, do you know how many people die in automobile accidents every year?
I believe it's about 40,000.
It's good, between 30 and 40,000. It used to be about 50, come down to 30 or 40,000. So If we knew the total number of passenger miles, the total number of miles that were driven every year, could we calculate what your odds were of dying in an automobile accident if you drove 20,000 miles a year?
Yeah, I think so.
Sure. You just divide the number of people who died by the number of miles that were driven and multiply that by 20,000.
Sure.
That's your risk of dying in a car.
But you shouldn't drive close to home because most accidents occur close to home. So you have to drive far from home.
We're getting to that.
Okay.
If you only drove 2,000 miles a year,
Yes.
what happens now to your risk?
It goes down.
What if you only drove 2?
It goes way down.
What if you were Tom Stemkowski and all you did was back out of your driveway and got T-boned by a pickup truck? Have we got the illusion? Office
I got
Space.
the reference, yeah.
I didn't.
You haven't seen Office Space?
Yeah, I forgot.
I didn't
Tom
remember his
Sikorsky was.
name,
Okay.
but as soon as you said back up with
Yep.
the pickup
Okay.
truck.
Yeah. Right.
So, if I was a
I
legislator...
was jumping to conclusions.
Get your butt back in the game. If I was a legislator in Texas, could I say there is no safe amount of driving you can do?
Yeah.
What's the point of it? Everybody knows that. The real problem with things like ethylene oxide is we are comfortable to some level with risks that we're familiar with. Risks we're not familiar with can be presented in such a way that they seem really, really scary and we have no way of putting them in context. And if I was going to pick a bone with people who are in the journalism profession and they present environmental issues, the first thing I would do is say...
Michael Hawthorne.
Well, I wouldn't say that because I don't want to give them any publicity, but I would say they're either totally incompetent or they're not doing their job, because in order for people to appreciate the seriousness of a risk, they have to have it in some context. We drive cars every day. We know that when we get in the car, there's a chance that we're not coming home that night. We don't worry about it a lot because the chance is really, really slim, and there's not a whole lot you can do about it. I mean, you walk to work if you want. You can take public transportation, but most people, if your number's up, your number's up. Big deal. It's a really, really small risk. In order to appreciate how dangerous something like ethylene oxide is under particular circumstances, you have to have the risk put in context. And there are particular environmental writers who make no effort at all to do that. As a matter of fact, they avoid it because their goal is raised in hell rather than trying to inform the public.
That's not. You went into motivation, which I asked us not to do, but
I told you we wouldn't be able to avoid it.
And I don't totally agree with you on that, but I don't want to argue about motivation. I think it's more about, in a lot of cases, stupidity and than it is about wanting to raise hell. I mean, but
it's
journalists in general want to raise hell.
If we're going to avoid motivation, I'm going to say that we're going to avoid people wanting to sell papers and win awards.
He's talking about win awards. Remember when we would do the we'd review the New York newspapers?
Oh yeah,
and it was.
In what context were we reviewing New York newspapers?
For awards. What happens is...
what are you doing giving out awards?
We were judging.
What are you doing?
Certain size newspapers will send stories that they think may be award-winning to a group of judges in another state, so as to be less biased, of about the same size newspapers.
Okay.
And so we would take the environmental groups, or the environmental category, and it was so satisfying that when you would read a story, and if they talked about lead was found in, but without any context of level, or give a level but not say if that was bad or anything, right in the garbage can. And it was, it would be a slam dunk into the garbage can. It's like, you are a bad writer.
You had to have data and you had to have context. You didn't have data and context. And I would say we typically trashed about 85%.
Oh my God, it was amazing. And they were teaching nothing.
Yeah.
I can buy into this. I can understand your feelings about it. I have a basic question. Why did they send this stuff to you?
What? No, they didn't send it to us. They send it to the Illinois Newspaper Association.
Yeah.
And so how do you know this? How do you know 85% of them are going in the can if you're not reading them?
That's what we
would read the story.
We would volunteer to be judges for this category.
Okay.
And yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Now I understand where it's
And
coming from.
remember the guy who would submit his column? You submitted 2 columns, and this was in another category completely, I think.
Yeah.
But his columns every year he would submit was him talking about his golf rounds.
It sounds a lot like our podcast.
It was. Here's what happened on the first hole. Here's what happened on the second hole. Here's what happened. What the hell? Why do you think this is anything?
Almost wanted to give him an award just just to floor him. It finally worked.
There's hope for us. Go ahead.
Okay. I forgot another rule I wanted to impose.
You didn't tell me this is going to be a whole bunch of rules.
It's my thing. Who bought the microphone?
Continue.
We all did.
I thought it was the U.S. Chamber of Commerce.
So I don't think we should talk about global warming at all until we get to X number of subscribers.
Depends a lot on what X is. I can get us there real quick, but go ahead.
Sure. It's nice to have a goal. I don't know why you would set that goal, but I'm willing
Well,
to play
because
along.
one, everybody talks about global warming and nobody knows
okay.
anything about it. And looking at you, Tom Steyer, and I'd like to not have that discussion until we talk about other, because there's this is such an endemic problem of people not understanding science and pretending that they do.
Now, I can go along with that, but my guess is it's going to come up peripherally because global warming causes everything. Just so you know. But go ahead.
It does. So anyway, I did want to get that out of the way. Risk also, when we talk about risk in general, we talk about the dose makes the poison, and the example I had hoped my older brother would go to instead of going right to ethylene oxide, but I guess he doesn't know what foreplay is anyway. Is that oxygen and water, 2 things that can kill you, right? Oxygen, you can't breathe 100% oxygen for a great period of time. I don't know how long you could. I don't know.
But there is oxygen toxicity.
But eventually...
Except you've done this backwards, but continue.
Really?
You ask people what are the most important chemicals in their life. What can they not do without for any length of time? And if they have any brains at all,
alcohol,
which is way ahead of our, it's going to come back. Besides that, your audience would come back with that: oxygen and water. But it turns out the most essential chemicals that we have to deal with, that we absolutely have to have, even over short periods of time, are things that are toxic in high enough concentration.
And both are. That woman who died in the contest
It was in California, and it was hold your wee for a wee. And essentially, the contest, a couple of disc jockeys thought it would be hoots to have the audience drink as much water as they can without going to the bathroom for as long as possible. Some woman did that to the extent that she ended up dying of water toxicity.
A person died of water toxicity at the marathon I ran back in '98.
We have to make this thing credible.
Yeah. Wow. The paper gave the data that time, and I know it was well over a gallon right before the race.
And you do the same thing like with sodium. There's a woman who killed her son by overdosing him with sodium. So if you don't have enough sodium in your bloodstream, you're going to die, and that's your electrolytes get out of balance.
The water toxicity,
right? And if you have too much, you're going to die. So that's the way chemistry works when we talk about risk and effects in your body.
And how long have we known that the dose makes the poison?
There's some guy, Paracelsus, could it be?
And he was not an AllChemist. He was an AllChemist.
He was.
It was before science even existed as an organized discipline. And in the 1500s, he came up with the aphorism, the dose makes the poison, which eludes large numbers of people even today.
It is. Because, for instance, you and I think probably Jared too, we're all born with a tiny little bit of uranium in our bodies. And it doesn't kill us. but we
Mine.
do have trace amounts. Well, maybe eventually it does. I don't know. But when you were talking about the water, drinking water, because I envisioned this podcast as going off into various tangents, it reminded me of a story. And this story involves Gerry's ex-girlfriend driving home.
Did she know him as Gerry or Keith Ortego?
I don't know.
Ortego.
But
The thing
she's...
is, you were the one who was there when I came up with the idea. We were in a ski lift.
Lets you know how much it impressed me.
You were in a ski lift?
Well,
I don't know what goes on. What goes on in Utah stays in Utah. So Gerry's ex-girlfriend is driving home, and she's had a number of beers, and this is when you could do that. And really has to pee, and I'll let Gerry finish it.
So, home was a little ways away yet, at a stoplight, and decided just let out a little bit. And yeah, the next morning there was a lot of cleaning in that car.
But I think this
quite
is the way
see
to
connection.
really popularize science. I don't know. It's just me. I think we were better off with Keith, whatever his name was. But
Ortego.
Thank
You
you.
should know all the 85 Bears.
No. Mike Tomzak was at Mass last Sunday.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Is he like an altar boy because he's little? Sorry.
No, he was third string quarterback.
Okay,
for the
but I got to
Falcons.
ask, was he wearing a jersey?
He was not.
How do you know he was?
He looks like one who would never lose his good
Because
looks.
he is a friend of our pastor, and our pastor introduced him.
Does he still have boyish good looks?
He does.
He has that.
Like me?
Yeah.
Continue.
No, more like me. Not like Beardsley McNipplehead over here. So that is a theme that we'll talk about a lot, because the dose makes the poison. And this also came up
I
with...
still don't see how it connects.
To what?
The Wiz just made a
that was had to
driver's
do with-
seat.
No, you brought up water.
It had to do with toxicity of water.
Yeah.
And you
People
may have
drinking water.
saved your ex-girlfriend
Oh!
without even realizing
Yeah.
it.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. I'm sorry.
That's all right.
I'm on board.
Okay.
But she didn't win a Wii, did she? Continue.
Done?
Doubt it.
Okay. So this also comes up with another pollutant of the day that we've been dealing with, which involves our favorite reporter, manganese. So manganese in the southeast side neighborhood where we all grew up is like a big deal now, because manganese is a potential neurotoxin. And notice I say potential. It doesn't mean if you get exposed to one atom of manganese, it's going to damage your brain. As a matter of fact, manganese is a micronutrient. Your body requires a certain amount, not a lot, but a certain amount of manganese for it to work properly.
And this is not unusual among a whole lot of compounds. Selenium's the same way. There's actually an amino acid that incorporates selenium.
Really?
But selenium's a pretty toxic material.
And you'll see people describe it that way.
Yep, absolutely.
All the time.
And it's actually reasonable because it is a toxic material, and in concentrations
Well,
that...
everything's a toxic.
I understand that. Continue.
Okay.
Sorry.
No, that's all right. That was good. So manganese is used in steel, right? A lot. And there's a lot of old steel mills that were torn down in our old neighborhood in the southeast side. So there's a lot of manganese shows up in the soil. Now, I don't believe it's a big deal, because you got to talk about, when you talk about risk, you talk about route of exposure, which can be ingestion. But on the southeast side, we get our water from the lake, so it's not going to be in groundwater.
What about in the air?
And inhalation is the other one, right? And dermal is the third. So we would look at those three.
There are actually a few others, but we don't want to go into them. Continue.
What happens in Utah stays in Utah. That's another one that's getting blown up. And then people are looking at particulate monitors and putting together pieces of the puzzle that you can tell a story, right? I mean, I think some of the stuff that our favorite journalist does is like a magician. And he is so I can't describe to you how despised he is in my business. And it's not just by us on the industry side, it's by people on the EPA side too.
Interesting.
They won't admit it because they don't want to be, on the front page of the trip. But everybody has.
They know what he's doing.
Yeah, they all know what he's doing. He's using the facts selectively.
Sure.
Because he gets the quotes. I mean, he's hearing all this stuff. He's just choosing what he's going to use. And it's just like a magician. A magician doesn't actually saw the lady in half, but he uses what's available to him, right, to tell a story that makes you think. He saw the lady. I don't think he does saw the lady in half. No, he doesn't. Okay. So that's really what happens a lot. And then, to our great disappointment, politicians jump on these bandwagons, the great majority of them. I personally think, knowing how most politicians work, that's because of the staffers. Because the staffers do most of the work for most of the politicians.
They have to think about these things and explain it to the politicians.
Correct.
Gotcha.
So, the Democrat or the Republican is equally as bad down in Springfield will glom onto one of these things and say, hey, this is polling really well. People are really worried about it. You got to come out against it. Without, again, understanding any of the science. And it also is certainly true that you can always find a scientist to say something you want to say. Correct?
I think that's probably true. Excuse me.
I'm sorry. You choked up about that?
Did you want me to say that?
Are you choked up? Does that make you sound?
No, I just inhaled the globulus of air or something. I don't know.
Globulus of air.
Shut up.
So I think that's part of the system that's broken too. People go on and on in context about something that we're not going to talk about till we get to 10,000 subscribers. I've just decided. People talk about, bad science. Man,
Can I make it extra
bad
credit
science
for my
all
class?
the time. Sure.
Okay.
Well, I would get subscribers any way you want.
Anyway.
Continue. Whatever. People are always harping about bad science, and we get exposed to bad science on almost a daily basis from journalists and politicians, just on stuff like this, which is really what motivated us to do this, whatever this is thing in the first place.
Bottom line with manganese, why do you consider manganese unlikely to be a problem of any significance?
Because the amount of particulate that people are exposed to is so small these days. I mean, part of the trick.
So if I was going to get in the journalism racket,
yeah,
what I would not be focusing on would be the amount of particulate that any individual would be exposed to. It would be these big honking mountains of manganese dust over by the Calumet River.
Yes.
Gotcha. So I could actually do this racket.
Oh yeah, it's easy.
Okay.
Oh God.
And then if you want to target one particular facility,
that's better. You want to isolate.
Yeah.
Is this who's that idiot?
Alinsky.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we can do environmentalism, the Alinsky method.
Yes.
So we pick out a particular company that's involved in manganese.
Yes.
And we beat the living crap out of them.
Yes.
Showing the giant mountain of manganese.
Exactly. That is really how it's done.
Okay.
And if you can show that, there's more particulate downwind of this facility than there is upwind.
Who would have thunk that?
I know. And then this facility has manganese in it. And then you're creating the picture for the public. Well, obviously, we're getting more particulate, and obviously it's full of manganese because this place has manganese, and that's how you do that.
Gotcha.
The actual risk, no, that's never going to come up. Interesting side point. So most of the exceedances of air quality standards we have in these days are related. Do you know what pollutant they're related to?
I would guess particulate.
It is PM 2.5.
Right. Okay.
And that's a function of where you draw the line in terms of particulate size, wouldn't that be?
Yeah.
So the smaller you make the particulate, the more likely that we're going to have exceedances.
Well, no, that's not exact.
Okay.
It
was a guess.
It could also be where you move the goalposts.
That's it.
That's like I am a diabetic, and I got a lot more diabetic friends when they redefined what diabetes is, where your blood sugar has to be.
Huh. I didn't know that.
Same thing happened with
You're not
asthma.
invited in the club. That's why.
Okay.
But so PM 2.5 exceedances are the most common reason that we have bad air quality days. But the vast majority of PM 2.5 comes from
I'm going to guess
Natural
mobile
sources.
sources.
Natural sources. Like?
forest fires.
Dang it.
Oh my gosh. Poor Australia. They are in the hamper forever.
I mean, industry gets hammered for PM 2.5 every time. By the way, Chicago Tribune has a permit that allows them to put out 40 tons of PM 2.5 a year, just so you know.
How many tons?
40.
40 tons.
It's 80,000
of
pounds.
toxic PM 2.5.
Yeah.
Bloody hell.
Who knew?
And what do we get out of that?
Don't go by
just a
Tribune Tower.
low-life newspaper.
I know.
Wow.
Do you know
A travesty.
I know.
How do we stand for that?
I don't know. It's terrible.
Maybe they should start laying off people.
But industry puts out less than 20%, according to EPA data, of all PM 2.5.
Did not know that.
But they get hammered for it. So there you go. And on that happy note, our half hour plus, more or less, is
Getting
up.
hammered was the happy note.
Thank you.
And from Keith Ortega and
Where'd it go?
Ortego, whoever he is, and the rest of us.
We even know Rich named the Super Bowl Bears who didn't get to be on the Super Bowl Bears.
Did they get rings?
Al Harris and God, I can't remember who the other one
Well,
was.
Harris was pretty.
Oh, Wilbur Marshall. No.
Todd Bell.
Todd Bell. That's Ding Dong Bell. Yeah.
They were pretty good. How come they didn't?
They had contract holdouts that year.
Didn't know that.
I know.
Okay. All right. Thanks, Keith.
Anyways.
Memories. All right. We'll see you next time on the AllChemist Channel.
Thanks.
Adios.